All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. We're on page 420 on the top in chapter 20. So we're talking about earlier how to implement the trait of piety. How do we attain this trait of piety, and how do we make it part of our lives? So Ramchal here continues by giving us another example of pious conduct. Now, previously he talked about how someone was he's talking specifically about Gedaliah, that he was being overly pious in a wrong way, and that caused the murder of many, many Jews because he wasn't willing to accept Lashon Hara about someone who was trying to kill him. Remember this example we spoke about last week, right? Okay, so now we're going to continue with another example. An additional example from the Talmud. He says the second temple, the second Beis Hamikdash, it too was destroyed as a result of such Chassidut, such piety, that was not judiciously weighed to determine its propriety. So he says, B'maaseh dvar kamtza amru. He says, regarding the incident of Bar Kamtza, who sought to incite the Roman government against the Jews, the sages related as follows: Savu rabbanon likarove. He says, for the sake of maintaining peaceful relations with the Roman government, the majority of the sages wished to offer the Caesar's animal on the altar, even though it was blemished and unfit. Amruluhu, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolis. However, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolis said to them, Yomur balimumin kravin legabi hamizbech. We cannot offer this animal, as people will then say that blemished animals may be offered on the altar. Savra lemiktale. The sages accepted this argument and considered killing Bar Kamtza so that he would be unable to report back to the Caesar that his offering had been rejected. Amr Luhu Zechariah ben Avkolis. Zechariah ben Avkolis said to them concerning the second idea, Yomer meitil mum bakachim yahareg. But then people will say that one who blemishes consecrated animals is put to death. Ben kach uben kach halach osa harasha v'hilshin al Yisrael. Meanwhile, the evil man Bar Kamtza went and slandered Israel, telling the Caesar that the Jews refused his offering because they were rebellious. And right, Ba Kesar v'hichriv Yerushalayim, and as a result, the Caesar came and destroyed Jerusalem. So what are we talking about here? What happened here? Remember, there was a story where there was a party. It was a great party that was going on, and there was an individual there were two individuals. One was Kamtza, and one was Bar Kamtza. And the wrong one got the invitation because he was in a feud with the host of the party, and comes to the party, and the host of the party says, "Get out of my house, leave." He says, "Please don't embarrass me like this. Don't do this." He says, "Leave, get out, take your bags and go." He says, "I'll pay for half your party." He says, "I don't care what you want to pay. I don't want you at my party." He says, "I'll pay for the entire party. Just don't embarrass me." He says, "I don't care." And he kicked him out. And our sages tell us that the rabbis who were there were also liable. They were also liable for this tragedy because they should have stood up for this individual, and they should have demanded that he accept this person's offer, and they should not embarrass a person in such a way. And the rabbis stood by quietly. That was part one. Part two was that later on, this individual got so upset at the rabbis that didn't defend his honor, and he was so upset about all that happened that he was humiliated publicly, that he went to the Caesar and told the Caesar that the Jewish people don't respect you in such a great way that they won't even put your offering on the temple. They won't bring your offering to the temple. So, of course, the Caesar sends an animal, and what this individual did, this Bar Kamsa, what he did is he blemished the animal before it came to the temple. So he can't put a blemished animal on the temple, but the rabbis knew what the consequence could be. And in what the Talmud says here was a wrongful piety, right? This is not a time to be pious. You got to save the Jewish people. You put that animal on the altar, and you bring it, notwithstanding what people may say. And you see there were many different calculations. Oh, people are going to say, so they said, let's kill Bar Kamsa. They said, no, we can't kill him. Then people are going to think that it's someone who brings a flawed, an animal that is not perfect to the temple, that he's put to death. And, bringing all of these pious rulings, so to speak, or judgments, and in the wrong place. And our sages tell us that this costed us the second temple. It means there's a right place for it. Okay, if you want to see commentary number 12 and number 13 below, you can see the whole story in the background with greater detail. So then now Ramchal continues, and he says as follows. And the sages ascribed Jerusalem's destruction to Reb Zechariah's excessive piety. And this is the meaning of what Rabbi Yochanan said regarding the incident. The misplaced humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolas destroyed our temple, burned down our sanctuary, and sent us into exile among the nations. Why? Because it was misplaced humility. And we have to understand the responsibility that we have, our sages tell us, of doing the right thing at the right time. Now, could it be, which is most likely yes, could it be that the temple would have been destroyed anyway? Absolutely. Right? The temple wouldn't have been destroyed if God didn't want it to be destroyed. There's no question that God willed it to be destroyed. So in that case, why are we blaming Rabbi Zechariah? Well, he was the impetus. He was the trigger that made it happen. It means it could have been many other things that would have made it happen, but it wasn't. It was his wrongful piety, his pious deeds in the wrong time, in the wrong place, that really caused this terrible tragedy. So, I was just having this conversation. I don't know if it was today or yesterday with someone, and we were talking about something that happened. So we said it was funny because we said, oh, I remember what it was. I remember exactly what it was. So an individual decided that we published these beautiful Spark weeklies. The torch, the spark of the torch. So either way, it's a weekly Shabbat. If you get our emails every week, you should receive that a link to it. You can download it. It's really a magnificent, beautiful color, 4-page. Some thoughts on the parsha, etc., etc. So a friend of mine came over and said, "I want to put it out in some of the local kosher vendors." So he put one out at the kosher vendor. And the first time it was put out, someone called up and said, "I love this weekly pamphlet that you guys put out. I want to advertise there." And this person decided to give a pretty nice donation every month to have his advertisement there for his, not for a business, he just wanted to have a verse from the Torah. So printed on the, in honor of his mother or his wife, either way. So my friend, I thanked him. I thanked him very much. I said, "Look, you were the one who told us to put it out there." And there in the first week, we got someone who decided that they want to sponsor this great weekly paper. So he said to me, "Well, God willed it to happen. It would have happened anyway. So what are you thanking me? God willed it to happen. It would have happened anyway." So what's the answer to that? It's 100% true. It would have happened anyway. God willed it to happen, so it will happen. But do you know what the special thing is? The special thing is that you were the one who brought it about. Meaning, you were the one, you were the impetus, you were the one who brought it to life. God, it says that Megalgalin Schus al Yidei Zakei, God brings merit on those who are meritorious. Right? So let's say someone gives a donation to a synagogue, right? Because you asked them, right? They would have given that donation anyway. But God made it happen through your hands. God made it happen through you because you deserve that merit. You deserve that credit. And we have to, it's a very, very important thing. Just one second. There's something wrong here with this microphone. Oh, it's in the wrong thing. It's in the wrong thing. Oh, well. All right. I apologize. The microphone was connected to the wrong input. I didn't see it moving, the meter. All right, so let's continue. So it's very, very important for us to realize, let's just stop for a second here and understand what we're talking about here. When a person does a mitzvah, what they're doing is they're bringing about a connection between us and the Almighty. Now, what happens if we inspire someone else to do a mitzvah as well? What happens then? Who gets the reward for it? You both get the reward for it. The person who does the mitzvah and the person who inspired them to do the mitzvah. And there's no, it's not like a pyramid scheme where you only have, $1, so now you got to cut up that dollar to so many pieces and everyone gets their little share of it. It's not the way it works. When I have $1 and I give you $1, right? So you have the dollar and I don't. But a mitzvah is not like that. A mitzvah is like a candle. It's like the flame of the candle. Where I have the flame, I light your candle, and now we both have a flame. Right? We both have a flame. So it's never diminished. It's never diminished. That's the idea of a mitzvah, is when you ignite someone else and inspire them to do a mitzvah, you get the credit for that mitzvah. Let's say that person would have done that mitzvah anyway. True. But you have the privilege that you were the vessel through which that mitzvah came about. So you get the credit for it. Right? So there are many, many examples we can give. But the idea that we need to remember, it says, Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. The mitzvah is like a candle. And Torah is like light. Why is Torah light? Because Torah inspires one to do mitzvahs. Torah inspires, Torah gives a person the vision and the perspective and understanding of the relationship with God, of the importance of everything that we do. So let's continue here. Ramchal now continues. So it's a funny thing. If you look at the last sentence here, the misplaced humility of Rabbi Aryeh ben Avkolas destroyed the temple, burned down the sanctuary, and sent us into exile among the nations. It's a very powerful statement from the Talmud. A very powerful statement in the middle of page 421. Okay, the next paragraph, the lesson gleaned from these two incidents. You see from here, that we have very clear proof that with regard to piety, one must not assess the action based solely on how it immediately manifests itself, on short-term results. But rather, our sages tell us that tzorich lifnos kova chol lechol atzdadin sheyuchal seichel ha'adam liros. Rather, one must turn this way and that and assess the action from every angle that the human intellect can discern. Ad sheyodun be'emes eze yichshar yoser, until he can accurately assess what is more appropriate at this moment. Ha'asiya or aprisha, taking action or refraining from action. And it's such an important thing. We cannot assume one and neglect the other. We have to take into consideration both of them. So Ramchal illustrates this idea that at times it is better to forego an apparent act of piety. Now, just imagine this, that there's no question, and we know this as a fact, there's no question that the reason the temple was destroyed was because the Jewish people weren't worthy of having a temple at the moment. There's no question about it. So why is Reb Zcharia being held accountable here? Again, he was the trigger. It was a misplaced piety. And that misplaced piety is what he's held accountable for. Now, our sages are going to tell us something further. He says the Torah commands us in Leviticus 19, verse 17, you shall reprimand your fellow if he behaves improperly. Yet, numerous times a person will attempt to reprove sinners in a place or at a time when his words will clearly not be heard. And he thereby provokes the sinners to intensify their evil doing. So what happens? If a person decides to give a reprimand to their fellow in the wrong place, you know what the results are? The results are, sadly, that the sinner will many times choose, oh, really? You think you're going to get me? You're going to tell me what to do? I'm going to do it now intentionally. I'll give you an example. There is a halacha, a law in Jewish law, right? It's even though it's common sense, but there's an actual law in halacha that tells us that one is not allowed to talk in synagogue. You're not allowed to talk in synagogue. Things of just idle chatter. You're not supposed to ask your friend, hey, how's business going? Oh, really? Oh, yeah, really? I didn't hear. Yeah, you're going to get into the whole conversation, right? No. You're not allowed to have that conversation in synagogue. You can go outside synagogue, go into the kiddush room, go into the other room, into the hallway, no problem. But not inside the place where people are praying. You're not allowed to talk. Okay, that is an obligation on every person who walks into a synagogue, right? To have a proper decorum, to carry ourselves in the right way when we're in a synagogue. Okay. Now, what happens if you're Mr. Pious, right? My name is Ed, and I'm going to tell you how to conduct yourself in our synagogue. Excuse me. I see you talking over there. Shh. Right? And you go and you decide you're going to be the usher or the policeman to tell people who can talk and who can't talk and what they could say, can't say. You know, people sometimes get a little bit carried away because they're very, very pious, right? And they want the name of Hashem to be sanctified. Do you know if these people are going to listen to you? Well, if you don't know that they're going to listen to you, you're not allowed to say anything, says the Talmud. The Talmud says very clearly, one is not allowed to reprimand someone who's not going to listen to you. Right? So Lauren, you're shaking your head, right? And you're saying, how do I know?
So is that at any time? Or are you talking about just in shul?
Anytime. You're not allowed to reprimand someone if you know that they're not going to listen. Let's see this. 1 second. You ready? We're going to read it right here inside together. So now what happens? You're going to go over to this group of schmoozers in shul, and you can say, guys, this is not the right time, right? What's going to happen when you walk away? Mr. Righteous, right? He's going to tell us when to talk, when not to talk, right? Like he never talks ever in shul either, right? And then they continue talking, and now it's even worse, even a greater disgrace of God's name, because now the people are going to talk knowing that they're doing the wrong thing. And whose fault is it now? Oh, Mr. Pious, it's your fault, right? Now it's on your dime because you should never have said anything. It's better for them to be ignorant in the knowledge of that sin than knowledgeable and do it on purpose. Okay? It's better to do it by mistake than to do it on purpose. And when you tell them that they're doing the wrong thing, the result is that it is now on your clock that they're doing that. He says, he says, why in such situations where reproof will have the opposite effect, it is not reflective of piety to speak out, but rather to remain silent. So you know what they're, thank you so much. By the way, we have a live audience here. I don't know if you knew that. All right, it's beautiful. So anybody who wants to come join us live at the Torch Center, you're welcome to. So we have our friends here on Torch Zoom. We have our friends on Facebook and YouTube. Please give us a thumbs up. Thank you. So we know that you're there. And YouTube and Twitter. And we also have a live audience here. So it's like we're like 3D, basically, right? So Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam She'akol Niyeh B'Dvaro. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So what is the pious thing to do if you know that they're not going to listen to you? The pious thing, the righteous thing, the proper way for you to conduct yourself is to not to say a word. Not say a word. That's the pious thing for you to do. Not to say a word. It's an amazing thing. You're telling me not to say anything? Here I see them doing something that's not right, and you're telling me to keep my mouth shut? Yes, that is the pious way to act at times. And so said the sages of blessed memory in Tractate Yevamot 65b, 2/3 of the page down. It says as follows: Kishem shemitzvah lo dora nishma, just as it is a mitzvah to say something in reproof that will be heeded, kach mitzvah shelo lomar es she'enu nishma. So is it a mitzvah not to say anything that will not be heeded. Meaning, if you know that the person will not listen, you have a mitzvah not to say a thing. By the way, it also applies to our children. Right? To reprimand our children, we have to know our children. We have to know what they're capable of. You have to know what's right and what's wrong. And if we just reprimand our children at the wrong time, what is the result? The result is that now they might do the wrong thing and hide it from us. You know, I say this many, many times. We have a father here. We have a father here of young children. So I'm going to share a secret here. The secret's like this. What is worse than a child doing something wrong? What's worse than a child doing something wrong is the parents catching them red-handed. A parent should never catch their children doing something wrong. The parent knows what the child does, hopefully. A parent knows what a child does. So now by catching the child, you know what you're doing? You're just telling the child, next time you better hide it better. That's not what you want from your children. You want them to learn right from wrong. Children have a conscience. Children know what's right and what's wrong, right? If a child, and this is an example I've given many times, you have a dessert. When dessert comes, and any dinner, particularly on Shabbos, right? So the children, at some point during the meal, they leave the table, they go play with their siblings, they go play with their friends who might be eating as guests in your home. And at some point, what will happen is that the children will come back because they smell the dessert. They smell that there's dessert on the table. Like, okay, so they're jumping at the candies or at the chocolate or whatever it is that you have over there. Ice cream. And you say, okay, only one or only two, however many you decide. And then you see that there's a child who's trying to take another one. So what many parents would do is they would take the jar and they'd put it up on the top shelf, and now the kid can't take it. And now the child's not going to steal. He's not going to take anything without permission. But the question is that the best thing to do? Is that the best thing to do for us to tell the child or to hide it from the child? No. Leave it on the table and let them learn not to take it. Now, I don't want to get into details of exactly how I would typically handle this, but I'll tell you, the basic idea is like this. I don't want to get, it's not a class on education or on parenting. And not that I'm exactly the master of parenting, but I try to. I work very hard at it. My wife and I, we work very hard and read up and learn and ask rabbis and listen to classes about parenting, because it's not a science that we just download as a file, right? It's a process of learning and growing and understanding. But what we would do is, if that child were to take it, now if you see him taking it and he sees you taking it, he sees that you see him taking it, so then you have to, there has to be accountability. But if he does not see that you saw at the corner of your eye, you made believe you didn't see. So there's a very easy way to make that child feel really, really awful about what he just did, without him knowing that you know. You have to be smart about it. You call all the kids to the table and you say, you know what? Because nobody took anything extra, and everybody listened so nicely, everybody can have one more. And this child's not going to be able to take another one because it's going to hurt him so badly, right? He just can't, right? Why don't you take another one? No, I don't want another one, right? He can't. People want to be trusted. People want to be believed. And we have to do our best to continue to give our children that feeling that we do believe them. Even everyone makes mistakes, right? But that doesn't mean they need to be now an example. We're going to show the whole world what happens when we catch a child who says something which is untruthful, right? It's very, very important to maintain a child's innocence in your eyes, or at least in their eyes, that you think of them as someone who is trustworthy and doing the right thing. So what the Talmud says in Yevamot 65b is something so fundamental. If you know that someone's not going to listen, you're not allowed to say, it's a mitzvah not to reprimand them. Is that amazing? If you know they're going to listen, you have to tell them. But if you know that they're not going to listen, you're a mitzvah not to tell them. So the obvious question that people ask all the time is, how do I know? How do I know if they're going to listen or not? Our sages tell us that you have to know the person. For example, we talk about judging a person favorably. So if you look at the Mishnah says, "Havidanas kol ha'adam l'kavsachos." Judge every person favorably, but if you look carefully in the word of the Mishnah, it doesn't say every person. It says kol ha'adam, the whole person. You have to know the whole person. Who over here knows another person that you know them so well, you know the whole person? Right? We know our children, we know our parents, we know our spouse, hopefully well enough that it's the whole person. And what's if your spouse, someone comes to you and says that your spouse shoplifted or did something, right? You'd say, I know, they're never, no. You can tell me a lot of things about them, but that I don't. Why? Because you know the whole person. And judging on the whole person, you know they would never do such a thing. Right? So that same principle applies. That same principle applies when we talk about reprimanding a person. You have to know the whole person. If you don't know the whole person, you don't have the right to now suddenly reprimand them. You have to know the right and the wrong for each person. And if you don't know, it's not your place, except if you're in Israel. In Israel, everybody tries to raise each other's children, right? In Israel, you go to the park and everyone tells you what you could feed your child, what you can't feed your child, what you could do, what you can't do. And everybody, I remember when my son, when we lived in Israel for the first 3 years, my wife and I, so my wife went to the park and everyone's telling my wife what she could feed the child, what they can't feed the child. It's in Israel, it's a special place because everybody's family, right? It's like one big Hamisha family, right? But typically, if you go to the park here, it's not my business. It's your child. You do what you do with your child, and I'll do with my child what I do with my child. And everyone minds their own business in a way, right? It's a question which one is right and which one is wrong. If people should be a little bit more loving and concerning, but either way, the idea is that every person needs to know who it is they're talking to. You need to know who you're talking to. Okay. Another example. Re'eh, consider the following. It is obviously appropriate for every person to eagerly run to a mitzvah matter. So you have a mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah may be, everyone wants to run to do the mitzvah. It's obvious and appropriate for each person to eagerly run to a mitzvah matter. And to endeavor to be among those who engage in it. However, sometimes a quarrel can result from this eagerness. So that the mitzvah becomes more degraded and the name of heaven more desecrated through it than it is glorified by one's eagerness to participate. In such situations, the pious person is certainly obligated to forego the mitzvah and not pursue it. Not pursue it. Let me give you, I gave this example previously. I think it's a very good example. Two people who are trying to say Kaddish for a loved one. So typically you don't only say Kaddish, but you try to lead the services, right? So now they're fighting who got to the podium first and who's supposed to lead the services. You think that's going to be a merit to the soul of the deceased, right? But people go, no, I have to do this mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. I got to do this. And instead, it becomes a desecration. So, and there are many, many, many examples of such. Many examples where people wrongly place their piety, they put their piety in the wrong place. And that's something you got to be very, very careful about. Okay? So, any questions so far? Ed, any question? Bobby, Aliza, Sandy.
I just have a quick comment when you were talking about not catching your child red-handed or not approaching them at that time. It made me think that's exactly how Hashem dealt with Adam and Eve in the garden.
That's correct.
Very gently
and what did God say to them? God said, it's a very good example. Thank you, Sandy. Right? What did God say? God didn't say, hey, what did you just do? Caught you red-handed. No. God asks, where are you? What are you doing? Right? And it's like slowly getting to the idea that they did something wrong, but not coming in an extreme. We see the same thing with Cain and Abel. Right? What happened? God says, what happened to your brother? God doesn't accuse him of murder. Right? Give him a way out. Give him a. So I want to share with you an amazing story I just read this weekend. The Klosenberger Rebbe, right? Now, Klosenberg is a Hasidic dynasty, like many, many, many Hasidic dynasties. I know most of you know Chabad. You've heard of a Chabad, but Chabad is only one of like 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 Hasidic dynasties. And there are some that are enormously large, like Satmar and Babov and Belz, and you have some really, really very, very large Hasidic dynasties. And one of them was Kloisenberg. You have Gur, Gur is tens of thousands of Hasidic followers. Excuse me. Right, so they have tens of thousands of Hasidic followers, and they okay. So this one Hasidic dynasty, a student from a yeshiva, comes to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, I was just thrown out of yeshiva. So he says, I'm going to go talk to your rabbi. So the Rebbe goes to his rabbi, and he says to the rabbi, do you know such and such student? He says, yeah. He says, I gave him so many chances. I've warned him so many times. I'm done. I'm done. No more. He says, you know, it's funny that you say that. He says, I ask for mercy from God, for forgiveness, every single day. And I promise him I'm going to do better, and I don't. And it's been thousands and thousands of times that I've said to God, God, today I'm going to change. And I didn't change. And then I say again, today I'm going to change. Obviously, what the rabbi was saying is that what the Rebbe was saying is that this rabbi also asks the Almighty for forgiveness every day and doesn't necessarily hold up to his part of the deal, right? So now this child, you're gonna make him suffer. You're gonna throw him out of school because he didn't live up to his, right? You didn't either. I didn't either. We're all guilty of the same thing, right? Yes, we ideally, it would be nice for us to be better and for us to behave and to do the right thing always, but that's not always possible. It's not always we're not always ready for it. So I think it's a beautiful idea. Obviously, the student was let back into yeshiva, but the idea is a person needs to know.
You used to have the torch Wi-Fi open for everybody. Now you put in a password on it.
All right, so now let's continue. So the verse now continues and said no. So Ramchal continues here and says, "V'chein amru zuchron levracha be'inyan halavim."
And we are using very minority, but
Okay, so I'm sorry over here. I'm just getting a little confused. There's some background noise here. Okay, so sometimes the right way for a chassid, for a pious person to act, is to not act. Sometimes not act. Okay? In such situations, the chassid is certainly obligated to forego the mitzvah and not pursue it. Now we're on the top of page 423. And so said the sages of blessed memory concerning the Levium, the Levites, specifically the children of Kahat, who were responsible for carrying the holiest vessels of the tabernacle during travel. Zelashonam, this is the quotation of their language. Mipnei, this is in Bamidbar, Mipnei shehoyu yodim shekol mi sheto'on, to'ein, be'aron schore meruba. Why did Hashem command Aaron and his sons to assign each of the children of Kahas to a specific task in carrying the holy vessels? Because the children of Kahas knew that anyone who would carry the Aron, the ark, would merit great reward. And were they not given specific assignments, they would abandon the shulchan, the table, the menorah, the beautiful menorah, and the altar, and instead everyone would run and carry the ark to merit the great reward for those who carry the Aron, those who carry the ark. In the course of this eager pursuit, this one would argue, I am carrying here. And another person would argue and say, I'm carrying here. As a result, they would conduct themselves with disrespect in the Aron's presence, in the ark's presence, and that would be a terrible thing. And they would then be smitten by the Shekhinah, by the divine presence, in retribution for their disrespect for the sanctity of the ark. To prevent this from occurring, Hashem instructed Aaron, the high priest, and his sons to assign each of the children of Kahas to a specific service. In any event, we see the eagerness to perform a mitzvah without careful assessment of its consequences can result in a grave misdeed. It would actually have been more a consonance with piety to forego carrying the ark when others sought to carry it, thus preventing its desecration. Meaning like this. So this is also something which actually happened in the temple, is that the Kohen, they had different jobs, and they would have a gorol, they would have a lottery that would, each person would be assigned to specific jobs, not only in the carrying of the tabernacle and different parts of it, but also in the actual service. There were different parts that would, and they would have a specific, they would have a lottery, and each person would get a different part of the service. Why? Because there were parts that were more honorable. There were parts that were more holy. And what would happen? I want to do that mitzvah, and he wants to do that mitzvah too. So at one point they used to have a race who can run up the ramp of the to the altar and back down. And one of those who was losing, obviously, probably, would push the other guy off the ramp, right? And people would get hurt and possibly die. And the rabbis instituted that they no longer had that race. Instead, it would be the lottery system. But we see from here that you have to put it in measure. You have to be cautious and you have to be careful not to make the mistake of being overly pious in the wrong place. That's something we need to be very, very cautious about. Not to be overly pious in the wrong place. Okay? So, all right, so we're going to stop here. We're on the bottom of page 423. And hopefully next week we're not going to have class because next week is Passover. So we're going to be off next week. But the following week, we will be back. And God willing, we'll finish up chapter number 20. I apologize. We had so many technical difficulties. But when you guys come to the Torch Center soon, you'll see why it's not an easy gig. Because we have so many different pieces of technology here that have to work perfectly right. Right? Actually, I will tell you, it's very interesting for those of you who are online. So we had in our Torch Center, obviously this was a lounge. This was the centerpiece of the lounge, these couches here. And we had people coming and going all day, all morning, afternoon, evening, every day. We had classes in the classroom. But since COVID, we turned the classroom into a podcast recording studio, and we turned almost half the lounge into a video studio. So right now I'm in the video studio here. We call it Studio B at the Torch Center. And that's right. So one of the things that we realized not long ago is that the internet is being compromised because we had open Wi-Fi. For anybody who wanted to come, we had open Wi-Fi because people were coming here. But then we realized that people were coming to the restaurant next door and using the Wi-Fi, not here, which is fine. We're happy to help everyone. But we had to change it because it was using up our bandwidth. So when we would do these broadcasts, it would eat up all the bandwidth because people are watching their videos next door or doing whatever it is that they're doing. So we had to call an end to that. So we changed our system a couple of weeks ago. And while this class was going on, someone knocked on the door here at the Torch Center. Says, "What's going on? Why don't I have my free Wi-Fi?" Right? I used to be able to eat by the restaurant, get my Wi-Fi. I don't have no Wi-Fi anymore. So he says, "Now I have to have a password. I don't have the password." So that's part of the distraction that was going on over here. I only heard it. I don't see it because we have this barrier here. But either way, so I look forward to welcoming everybody to the center. You're welcome to come anytime. And if I'm not here, you're welcome to call me. I'll meet you here. I live 3 minutes away. But it really is an honor to hopefully really, really soon be back learning here at the Torch Center live with everyone. Right now we have a few live people in our live audience, but hopefully it'll be a robust group. We used to have like 20 people. You remember that, Ed? We used to have like 20, 25 people. It used to be a packed room. We used to need to turn the AC cooler and cooler because there was more people. It was like so hot in here, right? So thank God, those are good problems. What's that again? That's right. That's right. We have a bunch of reserved seats then. But I'll tell you what, the live broadcasts are not going to stop. We're going to still continue to do it, hopefully, on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, on Zoom, on all of the different platforms, but also with a larger live audience. And we're looking forward to that as well. So to our friends online, have a lovely Pesach. I do want to remind everyone that we posted 3 videos in preparation for Pesach, 3 videos. You can get them on YouTube on the Torch channel, which is youtube.com/torchweb. Also, in the Jewish Inspiration podcast, you can find those videos in audio format. All three of those podcasts were uploaded and are available for everyone. You can go to the Jewish Inspiration podcast and you can listen to those three podcasts. And today, hopefully tonight still, I'm going to record another podcast on totally new ideas to be derived from the Seder night. And hopefully we'll be able to learn, grow, and connect further and further, more and more together every day. So to our friends on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, so long, thank you so much for joining us, and have a magnificent Pesach, Chag Kasher V'Sameach, have a delicious, beautiful Passover.